All right, welcome back for another deep dive. This time, this one's for you. It's all about navigating workplace dynamics.
Okay.
Yeah, and sounds like you want to learn about like how to steer clear of all the drama, right?
Uh,
And really make the most of you know, the opportunities that come up, get ahead, all that good stuff.
I see.
So you sent us this source material, motivational speaker kind of guy,
Yeah.
and he's talking to an all-male audience, giving them tips on, well, exactly what we're talking about. Avoiding drama and getting ahead at work.
Okay. I'm interested to hear what he has to say.
Well, he's got some pretty strong opinions, that's for sure. I mean, almost like a set of hard and fast rules.
No.
And yes, some of them, well, they might surprise you,
Yeah.
actually. We're going to unpack it all, figure out what's useful, what's maybe a little problematic. And, oh, you've got to hear this story
So,
about a situation, kind of tricky, with a female coworker
really?
back when he was working at a car dealership.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, buckle up.
All right. Let's unpack it.
So first thing, he comes out with this phrase, don't where you eat. Basically means avoid workplace romances at all costs.
Uh-huh.
He's pretty adamant about that.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah, they can just lead to so much trouble, especially, well, most companies have strict policies against that kind of thing.
Right. Makes sense.
Right.
Workplace romances, they definitely can get really messy.
Oh, yeah,
Conflicts of interest, accusations of favoritism, that kind of thing.
for sure.
And not to mention legal problems for the company.
Absolutely. And to kind of make this point, well, he tells a story
Okay.
from his own experience working at a car dealership.
Oh, right.
So there was this female colleague, and she was, well, in his words, clearly interested in him.
Hmm.
But it was complicated.
How so?
Well, she was married, he had a girlfriend,
Uh-oh.
and of course the dealership had that, no fraternization policy.
Right. Right. Sounds like a minefield.
Yeah, so instead of pursuing anything romantic with her, he claims he used the situation.
What do you mean?
Well, he kind of noticed something. Certain high-value clients, specifically men, kind of, like 40s and 50s,
Okay.
looking to buy those, like, trucks or those fancy luxury cars,
Uh-huh.
they responded really well to this woman.
I see.
So what he did was he would basically tag her in to handle those clients,
Oh.
figuring they'd be more likely to buy from her.
And though, is that ethical?
Yeah, that's where things get tricky, right?
Yeah, I mean,
And because he referred them, he got 50% of the deal, any deal she closed.
Yeah.
He even brags about how much money he made.
well, on the one hand, he's not technically breaking any rules,
Right.
but it feels ethically questionable, wouldn't you say?
Oh, totally.
To use, well, a coworker's appearance, for financial gain.
Yeah.
And also assumes this woman, I mean, we don't know if she was even aware of what he was doing.
Right. We don't know her side of it. It definitely raises questions about consent, for sure.
It does. And, I mean, that was just his first piece of advice.
Oh, yeah.
So what else does he have to say?
From there, he moves on to this concept he calls leave your problems at home.
The work-life balance. I'm curious to hear his take on that.
Well, he's pretty hardcore about it. He uses this phrase, wipe your face before you walk in the door.
Wipe your face.
Yeah, meaning like leave all your personal stuff, baggage behind.
Okay, I mean, I get that to an extent.
Yeah.
Carrying a lot of emotional baggage, it can definitely affect your work.
Oh, for sure.
And also, if you're constantly talking about personal problems, complaining,
Yeah,
it can affect how people see you.
exactly.
Your colleagues might not take you as seriously.
But he doesn't stop at emotional baggage. He also says you got to leave behind like any negativity
Right.
or drama, even if it's directed at you personally.
Mm-hmm.
He even warns against going to your superiors if you're having problems with a coworker.
Really? Why?
He thinks it makes you look, well, unprofessional, weak even.
That seems extreme.
Yeah, a little bit, right?
I mean, I agree, gossiping and complaining all the time, that's not good.
No.
But there are definitely times when, you need to address something,
Oh, for sure.
negativity or bad behavior,
Yeah.
through the proper channels, I mean.
Right, it depends on the situation.
Yeah, the severity, the context. It's not always realistic to just grin and bear it, is it?
No, definitely not. And, company cultures are different too.
Oh, that's true.
Some are very open, they encourage feedback.
Mhm.
Others are, well, much more hierarchical.
Right.
So it's important to be aware of like the unspoken rules.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You can't just have a blanket statement that applies to every situation.
Exactly. And speaking of unspoken rules, this next piece of advice is interesting. Stay out of drama, protect your reputation.
Sounds good on the surface.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, your reputation, that's huge in any professional setting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I wonder what he means by staying out of drama. Is he saying avoid all conflict?
Well, this is where it gets a little conspiratorial. He claims supervisors, they often have these like spies within their teams.
Spies.
Yeah, people who report back on what other employees are doing.
Hmm.
And he says that information is used to make decisions about, well, everything.
Like what?
Promotions, demotions, even who gets fired.
Okay, that's a pretty cynical take. Although, I mean, in formal communication networks, they definitely exist.
Oh, for sure.
People talk. But to call them spies, that's, I don't know, it suggests something malicious.
Right. It creates this like paranoia.
It does. Like, you can't trust anyone.
Yeah. And it kind of oversimplifies things, how reputations are really formed.
Yeah, and like you said, avoiding conflict, that's generally good advice.
Mm-hmm.
But he makes it sound like even being near a disagreement, even if you're not involved, that can damage your reputation.
Right. Like you have to be totally neutral, uninvolved all the time.
Which isn't realistic.
Not at all.
And sometimes leaders, they have to deal with conflict.
They do. It's part of the job.
It's about finding that balance, right? Speaking up when you need to, but choosing your battles.
Absolutely. Okay. Ready for another power move?
Lay it on me.
This one's about handling your boss's ego. He calls it never outshine the master.
Oh, that's a tough one. I've seen that dynamic play out so many times, and it rarely ends well.
He actually believes that a lot of the negativity people experience at work, well, it's their own fault.
How so?
They fail to manage their superior's ego.
I guess I can see that perspective. Being respectful of authority, understanding those power dynamics,
Right.
that's definitely important.
He says, instead of showing off your own skills, make your boss feel good. That's the path to getting ahead.
I mean, to a degree.
He even uses this analogy, the teacher's pet.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Remember in school, everyone hated the teacher's pet.
Yeah.
He says it's not because they're snitching or sucking up, but because of the favoritism.
It's a bit oversimplified, isn't it?
Mhm.
There are many reasons why people might dislike a coworker.
True.
Not just because the boss likes them.
And this advice, it kind of ignores the fact that, well, talented, hardworking people, they just stand out,
They do.
whether they're trying to outshine anyone or not.
Exactly. Being genuine, being good at what you do,
Right.
those are valuable qualities.
Absolutely. Okay, so here's his final piece of advice, and it's probably the most controversial. You don't have friends at work.
Wow, that's bleak. Why does he say that?
He thinks keeping your distance from colleagues, that's the best way to avoid problems.
Like what kind of problems?
Personal attacks, gossip, all that. He believes if you get too close to people at work, it creates power imbalances.
I guess I can see that. Sometimes the lines get blurred.
And then that makes people more likely to disrespect you.
Or undermine your authority.
Yeah, exactly.
But to say you can't have friends at work at all,
Yeah.
that's pretty pessimistic.
Oh, yeah. He even gives this example, a wife constantly checking on her husband at work, emphasizing that socializing, it just takes away from work, right? It's a waste of time, a potential source of drama.
He makes work sound very transactional.
It is, in his mind. Like any interaction that's not directly about getting the job done, it's just a problem waiting to happen.
But work is a big part of our lives. I mean, it's natural to want to connect with people.
Right. And positive relationships, they actually can lead to good things at work.
For sure.
Like job satisfaction, better collaboration, even increased creativity.
Absolutely. It's not just about avoiding risk and maximizing individual gain.
Right. So there you have it. The rundown of this speaker's advice, some practical tips mixed with some pretty questionable strategies, and overall a very cynical view of work, wouldn't you say?
I would. It's like he's saying, you can't trust anyone, and you always have to be on guard.
Right. What do you think, listening in, have you ever been in a situation like this? What are your thoughts on his advice so far?
I mean, it's interesting, but it seems like he's missing something.
Yeah, let's dig a little deeper and see what else we can uncover.
I'm ready. Yeah, it's almost like he thinks work should just be, purely transactional. You clock in, you do your job, get paid, and go home. And repeat.
Right. No room for friendships or, any real connection.
Exactly. But work is, it's a big part of our lives, right?
It is.
I mean, it's natural to want to connect with the people you spend so much time with. I mean, wouldn't you say?
Oh, totally. He's just completely dismissing that whole idea. Like finding genuine connection at work, that's just not possible in his mind.
It's all about avoiding those risks and getting ahead.
Right, maximizing your own game.
Which brings us back to your question. Is this advice actually helpful? I mean, I suppose it depends on what do we even mean by helpful, you know?
Right.
Like if your only goal is to, I don't know, avoid any kind of drama and just climb that corporate ladder, then maybe some of his strategies, yeah, they could work.
But then there's the downside, right? What if you follow all this advice too closely? Does it make you isolated? Or miss out on chances to work together, to collaborate?
It's a real possibility.
You could become so focused on just protecting yourself,
Mm-hmm.
that you miss out on the good stuff.
Yeah.
The human connection that actually makes work, well, enjoyable, meaningful even.
Absolutely.
It's like he's saying you need to constantly be, I don't know, suspicious. Like everyone's out to get you, always on guard, playing the game.
It does. And it's exhausting, wouldn't you say?
It sounds exhausting, yeah. And then there's a question of, well, authenticity.
Oh, right.
Can you really build trust with your colleagues if you're always holding back?
If you're always calculating every move,
Exactly.
it seems kind of, I don't know, impossible.
It does a little bit. Maybe it's about finding that balance.
Okay, yeah.
Like, be aware of the power dynamics, the potential problems, but don't be totally cynical and detached.
Right. I think that's a really important point. It's not about just blindly following every piece of advice you hear.
No, definitely not.
It's about really thinking about it. What makes sense to you? What feels right? What matches up with your values and your goals?
So for you listening in, I think the real challenge is, well, what kind of work environment do you actually want to be part of?
Yeah. What role do you want relationships to play?
Right. Like, do you want to work somewhere where people genuinely connect, where there's collaboration, even if that means, maybe sometimes dealing with conflict?
Or is it more important to just focus on your individual achievements? Keep things separate, personal and professional.
Those are big questions.
They are. And there's no right answer.
No, not at all.
I mean, it really comes down to your personality, your goals, and honestly, the industry you're in.
Okay, so let's go back to that not outshining the master advice. I think we should explore that a little more. Maybe think about some other ways to deal with that power dynamic
Okay.
instead of, dimming your own light.
Right, right.
What if you found ways to support your boss while still, showing off your skills?
So like what? Taking on projects that play to their strengths, or offering to help with stuff they might not be as good at.
Exactly. Or even just, publicly acknowledging their contributions.
Make them feel valued.
It's all about creating that win-win
Right.
where you both feel, respected.
Yeah, for sure. What about the friends at work thing? I mean, is there a way to approach those relationships, in a healthy way?
I think so. Being careful about boundaries, maybe not sharing too much personal stuff too early.
Okay, that makes sense.
Just, build trust gradually. Watch how your colleagues interact with each other. Pay attention to the company culture.
See what's normal, what's appropriate.
Exactly. You can still be friendly, approachable, but without blurring those lines.
Yeah, like having lunch together, doing those team building activities.
Or even just offering to help out on a project.
Just little things to build camaraderie
Yeah.
without getting too personal.
Right. And I guess if you do find yourself getting closer to someone at work, just be aware of those potential conflicts of interest and always keep it professional.
That's so important. I mean, work can really put a strain on even the best friendships.
It can. So it's not about avoiding friendships altogether. It's more about, being smart about it.
Approaching them with some maturity.
Yeah, and self-awareness.
Right. Huge.
Think about your communication style, your boundaries. How comfortable are you with different types of relationships? Are you the kind of person who trusts too easily? Or maybe you have trouble saying no. Do you like to joke around a lot at work? I mean, understanding yourself, that's a good starting point.
It really is. And we also need to think about the company culture.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, some workplaces, they're very social, lots of after-work hangouts, that kind of thing.
Right.
Others are more formal, more focused on individual performance.
It's important to pay attention to those unspoken rules. What's considered friendly in one company might be totally inappropriate in another.
Absolutely.
And if you're ever unsure, well, just ask.
Yeah, good advice.
Talk to a mentor, a senior colleague, someone you trust, or even HR.
They can usually give you some good guidance.
Remember, you're not alone in this. Figuring out all those workplace dynamics, it can be tricky,
It can,
but it's a skill. You can learn it.
over time, with practice.
Exactly. And a healthy dose of critical thinking.
And who knows, you might even end up making some real friends along the way.
You might, yeah. Okay, so there's this one last piece of advice from the speaker. It really kind of stuck with me. The never outshine the master
Oh,
thing.
oh, right.
I get what he's trying to say, the ego, the power dynamics, but I don't know, it just makes me feel a little uneasy.
I understand that. It almost sounds like he's saying being ambitious is a bad thing. Like wanting to do well, that's somehow threatening. And I just don't agree with that.
Yeah, it's like you're supposed to downplay your achievements, hide your talents just to avoid, making someone else